Hey everyone, Reflected here, and today, with 10 campaigns already released and more to come, I thought I'd give you an overview of all the campaigns I've released to help you decide which one would best suit you and your playing style. First of all, let's get something straight. When you buy a module, you can either fly it online against other people or offline against the AI. Most modules come with a lot of offline content, training missions that teach you which switch does what and all the basic procedures, instant actions where you can jump into the cockpit and get into the action within a minute, and some single missions that are somewhat longer and more complex but still very user-friendly. Campaigns aren't meant to be any of these. Campaigns are for those who already mastered the given module and can operate most or all systems, safely take off, land, fly around, and are proficient in weapons employment too. For those who want to use all this knowledge and put it to a test in an extremely complex and realistic setting. If DCS is a study level sim among all flight simulators, well, likewise, campaigns are study level experiences among other single player content. If you want to start the engine with a single button and dogfight in external view, don't play DCS, it's not the right game. Likewise, if you want to jump in game for 30 minutes and just have fun blowing stuff up, campaigns are not the right content for you. With this in mind, it's not easy to compare campaigns, so I'm introducing the
hardcore factor,
a scale from 1 to 10 to rate each campaign, where 1 is casual, more fun-oriented, sacrificing realism, and 10 is as close to real life as the simulator permits, not giving a rat's behind about whether it's fun or not. By the way, it usually is. It's not about difficulty. A 1 can be just as challenging as a 10. It's not about quality either. A 10 is not necessarily better than a 1, only different. To better demonstrate what I mean, let's say a 1 is Rising Squall, the anime Hornet campaign, which is extremely well made, fun, difficult, but not for the realism nuts. A 10 would be Baltic Dragon's Raven 1, for example, that was written with the help of real-life pilots and where you're supposed to be a fully proficient virtual naval aviator to complete it. So if that makes sense, let me start with my World War II campaigns. Blue-Nosed Bastards of Botany is one of my first ones I've ever released, and I'd give it a hardcore factor of 6. It's not a recreation of actual historical events that really happened. I came up with all the missions. However, I came up with them based on dozens of books, personal memoirs, and combat reports I've read. There's still an incredible amount of research behind it. So these missions may not have happened, but they could have. It's historical fiction, a nice variety of missions flown by P-51 pilots in World War II. Another aspect that decreases the score is that Botany is not on the Normandy map, nor is Berlin or other German targets, so I had to make geographical compromises too. Still, you'll be transported back into the world of a World War II USAAF fighter squadron in 1944. Let's continue with Jagdflieger, which is pretty similar. All the missions are figments of my imagination, but they're still realistic and historically accurate. By the summer of 1944, the Luftwaffe was hopelessly outnumbered and outclassed by the Allies, and it was more of a desperate game of survival, and this is reflected in the campaign too. A nice variety of missions to keep the player entertained, like a realistic but fun movie about a young Luftwaffe pilot in 1944. So it gets a score of 5 out of 10. What about my other Luftwaffe campaign, Horrido? It's pretty much the same, except the 190A is very hard to fly against AI Spitfires and P-51s, at least for me. So instead of putting up the player to the frustration of fighting an almost cheating AI, I made the storyline even more creative and entertaining, with more out-of-the-box ideas like visiting Galland or escorting Goering's staff car. Therefore, I'll give it a score of 5 out of 10. Again, this is not about the quality of the campaign. It says this campaign is balanced between hardcore realism and entertainment. Let's move on to the big show. This Spitfire campaign was made based on Klostermann's similarly titled book. So the missions in this campaign are recreations of historical events. They happened in real life. However, in the book, some of these events are described in detail, but some others aren't, and I had to fill in the gaps with research or educated guesses based on research. Also, some of the locations described in the book are not on the Normandy and Channel maps, so I had to make compromises and change those locations. Therefore, this one gets an 8 out of 10 on the hardcore scale. Mind you, since we got the Channel map, I could finally make an alternate version using both Normandy and the Channel for more accurate locations, but these two maps are still not big enough to include everything I would have needed. Still, it's quite an immersive experience to read the book, then play the missions in DCS and let all those pages come alive. What about Wolfpack? These missions were made based on original combat reports, and I had a lot of resources available. So whatever happens in the campaign happened in real life. Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't care about variety, I only cared about what actually happened. If it was 5 bomber escorts in a row, then it's the same in the campaign. Still, I would give it only a 9 out of 10. Why? Because it uses the Channel map, and that doesn't include the Netherlands or Germany. So although the events are the same, the locations had to be moved to fit into the Channel map's boundaries. And therefore the missions are much shorter than they were in real life. Still too long for some players, but oh well. But apart from not having to sit in the cockpit of a Thunderbolt for 4 or 5 hours, you'll get a sobering insight into the lives of the pilots of the 56th Fighter Group. My latest Spitfire campaign is Beware Beware. Like Wolfpack, it was made based on original combat reports and squadron records, so everything is 100% historically accurate. There's one difference though. All the historical locations are on the Channel map, so I didn't have to make any compromises. The missions are exactly as long as they were in real life, and due to the shorter range of the Spitfire, you'll find out how important fuel management is. I give this campaign a 10 out of 10, meaning that players get as close to being an RAF fighter pilot in 1943 as it's currently possible in a simulation. There's one more World War II campaign in the works, V for Victory, for the Mosquito. This one is also historical fiction. It had to be fitted within the boundaries of the Channel map. But some of the missions are recreations of real-life events like Jericho or Carthage. The Mozzie was such a versatile aircraft, and it flew in many different roles. Of course, not by the same squadron and the same crews. Yet, in-game, I took the liberty to make the player fly in different roles in each mission. Bombing, recce, rangers, night intruders, oboe, you name it. This sacrifices hardcoreness so that I could show the entire Mosquito story in the campaign. But the missions themselves will be pretty hardcore and realistic. Have you tried navigating at 30 feet? Or follow a path in the darkness listening to oboe Morse codes? If you think you're a hotshot Mozzie pilot, this campaign will give you a run for your money. Therefore, I'll give it a 7. Moving on to the Korean War. Hunters over the Yalu. Just like some of my World War II campaigns, it's historical fiction. Realistic missions, but also products of my imagination. A wide variety of missions where you can fly the Sabre in a historically accurate setting, adding a pinch of urban legends like Casey Jones, the dreaded MiG pilot. You'll fly 6 missions leading a fighter bomber squadron, and 6 more leading a fighter interceptor squadron, to let you fly the Sabre in both air-to-ground and air-to-air roles. It gets a score of 4 out of 10, because in DCS we don't have a Korea map, so I had to use the Caucasus. While it looks pretty similar, same coastline, same mountains, etc., still the player has to play along a little bit in this game of pretending it's Korea. Well, it was either this or no campaign at all, and most players who play the campaign say it's quite a good stand-in for the real Korea. Not to mention it's much needed content for the Sabre to fly in its natural element, tangling with dozens of MiGs at 35,000 feet. Onto the 60s and Vietnam. My Huey campaign, Paradise Lost. This is a tough one. I mean, we don't have a Vietnam map, so I had to invent a fictional conflict in Guam that would enable the player to fly Vietnam-style missions. However, every mission, every event is based on personal accounts by Vietnam War helicopter pilots and are as realistic as possible. I'll give it a score of 8. Not just because of the fictional conflict, but because missions are generally shorter over this small island and landing zones are way larger than they were in real life. Yes, even that tiny one in Mission 1. Still, the campaign gives you a very realistic idea of what it was like to fly Hueys over the jungles of Vietnam in every role it was used in the late 1960s. Moving on to my Tomcat campaigns. Let me start with Fear the Bones, which is a 3. While it follows realistic Navy procedures and you better be able to land on the boat at night, I made this campaign with fun in the forefront of my mind. There's such a massive pop culture around the Tomcat. Think Top Gun or The Final Countdown. And as an 80s kid, I'm a huge fan of 80s music, games, and pop culture in general. So I wanted to tell a story that has it all, that brings you that 80s vibe, like a cheesy 80s action movie with you as the main character. You didn't watch Top Gun as a naval aviation documentary, or Rambo 2 as a documentary about the war in Afghanistan. Of course not. It's the same with this campaign. If you want to be transported back to your, my childhood with all its dreams and fantasies, this one's for you. It has the lowest score of all my campaigns, but remember what I said, it's not about the quality, it's about what kind of playing style it suits. And incidentally, it's one of my most popular campaigns ever. Make no mistake, these missions are still not instant action airquakes. It's a campaign. Remember what I said in the beginning of this video? Okay, on to Zone 5. I made this Tomcat campaign with Dave Bio Baranek, who was a Tomcat Rio and Top Gun instructor in the 1980s. We wanted to make a realistic 1980s air combat training program within DCS, like what Top Gun was. With his help, we managed to make it as accurate and realistic as it was possible in DCS. The syllabus, the challenges, the approach, departure, and range procedures, even the kneeboard cards. I'd still give it a 9 out of 10 on the hardcore scale, and I'll tell you why. We scripted everything up until the fights on call, but then we just let the AI loose and let it fight in whatever way it was hard-coded by Eagle Dynamics. This ensures a better replayability. Every time you replay a mission, you'll see a different outcome. On the downside, the DCS AI doesn't always use the most realistic intercept techniques. Then again, this campaign is not supposed to teach you that anyway. It's supposed to put you in realistic, increasingly challenging situations. So throw you off the deep end and see how you react. See if you sink or swim. The learning part comes from the debriefs. But this is what I love about this campaign. I can easily replay the missions as many times as I want, and it's just as much fun as it was for the first time. And finally, my upcoming campaign with Paco, Speed and Angels. In the first 10 missions, we recreate his famous documentary, putting you through the F-14 RAG, Replacement Air Group, so Tomcat training, then 6 further missions into a fictional conflict in the Marianas, based on his book Lions of the Sky. This will be a big fat 10. After 18 months of work so far, the AI is so heavily scripted to ensure a realistic experience that I never thought would be possible. On top of this, nearly half of the 35 voice actors are actual naval aviators. So the characters in the campaign are voiced by themselves. How epic is that? It will not be a training campaign in the DCS sense, so like a NATOPS audiobook, that shows you which switch you need to flip to turn on the HUD. No. It's a realistic and merciless DCS F-14 rag that will turn you into combat-ready fleet pilot, and the learning curve is steep. It's going to be the most realistic Tomcat experience in DCS to date. Okay, I hope this helped you decide which of my campaigns suits you best. My advice is, decide based on the module. If it's a plane you really like and you already deep dived into, and you're looking for a realistic and challenging setting to fly it in, go for the campaign. Ultimately, the goal of these campaigns is to be a virtual history book, so show the player what those pilots had to go through a virtual experience. Playing any of them, you'll learn about not only history, but handling the module, and about yourself too. This is why campaigns are my favorite way to play DCS. Alright, thanks a lot for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for further updates. See ya!